At 6:17 a.m., the power to my place went out. No flicker, no warning, just off. The lights dropped instantly, the Wi-Fi vanished. My screens went black one by one, like someone was shutting doors on purpose. It wasn't messy. It was clean, deliberate. That's what made it unsettling. I checked my phone, no outage alert, no utility notice, nothing scheduled. Then the water stopped running. That's when it stopped feeling accidental. I stepped outside and caught the tail end of an HOA maintenance truck turning the corner, moving slowly, unbothered, like the job was already done. My inbox refreshed. 3 lines, no greeting, no signature. Utilities were shut off for maintenance. This is not our responsibility, do not interfere. No work order, no schedule, no explanation, just authority pretending to be procedure. I called the HOA office, straight to voicemail. I called again, same result. On the 3rd call, someone answered. Her tone was casual, almost bored. Yeah, she said, we turned it off. I didn't respond right away. I asked her to repeat that. She didn't. She adjusted instead. I mean, maintenance required it. That's when it clicked. Real maintenance comes with notice. Real maintenance comes with crews on site. Real maintenance doesn't come with defensiveness. My place stayed dark. No cones, no signage. No workers anywhere, just controlled silence, the kind meant to force a reaction. Messages started coming in. Systems down, work paused, deadlines slipping by the minute. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was leverage. They weren't requesting anything. They weren't explaining anything. They were testing how much pressure it would take. What they didn't factor in was timing. Every unanswered call, every carefully chosen word. Every minute, the utilities stayed off. It was all being logged. Because once utilities are shut off without cause, this stops being an HOA disagreement. It becomes a liability situation. If you follow real HOA disputes or situations where authority quietly crosses the line, subscribe. These stories aren't about drama. They're about how facts and records change outcomes. I didn't panic when the power was cut. That matters because panic is exactly what moments like this are designed to trigger. My name is Alex Morgan. I run a quiet, home-based consulting business, fully registered, fully compliant. No signs outside. No clients are showing up at the door. Just structured work, scheduled calls, and deadlines that don't move. Everything depends on continuity. Power, water, internet. When those go out, work doesn't slow, it stops. And clients don't ask for explanations, they just notice the disruption. On the HOA side, compliance ran through Linda Carver. Linda wasn't loud, she didn't argue. She didn't posture, she handled things the same way every time through email, short messages, carefully phrased, always copied to the board. Linda liked control without friction. For months, I'd sent her basic questions, nothing emotional. Nothing public, just requests for clarity. Why did the same vendors keep getting approved? Why have maintenance expenses kept increasing? Why did notices never come with documentation? Linda always responded. Acknowledged the message, said she'd look into it, then moved on. No answers, no follow-up, until the utilities went dark. That's when communication stopped and pressure started. No email, no explanation, just action. And when someone replaces conversation with disruption, it stops being a misunderstanding. It becomes intent, because this wasn't about fixing anything. It was about control. Before that morning, everything followed a steady rhythm. My days were quiet. Systems came online early. Calls stayed on schedule. Work flowed without interruptions. Nothing about my place stood out, and that's usually how HOAs like it. No complaints, no notices, no warnings taped to the door. That normalcy mattered. Then, a few days before the utilities were cut, Linda Carver showed up in person. That was unusual. Linda didn't usually visit homes. She preferred distance. Emails, board CCs, paper trails that stayed vague enough to protect her. She stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, posture straight, tone polite but firm. Just doing a routine walkthrough, she said. No smile, no explanation. She looked around longer than necessary, checked the meter, glanced at the side of the house where the utility lines ran, took notes without sharing what they were for. I asked if there was an issue. She shook her head. No violation, she said, just confirming compliance. That was it. No follow-up email, no written notice, no summary of what she was confirming. And then she left. Looking back, that visit wasn't casual, it wasn't routine. It was reconnaissance. Everything was working. Everything was compliant. Nothing needed attention, which made what happened next impossible to justify. When the utilities went dark days later, Linda's quiet visit suddenly made sense. She hadn't come to fix anything. She'd come to map leverage. The notice arrived the next morning, not by certified mail, not posted on the door, just an email, short, clean, carefully worded. Temporary utility interruption required for maintenance review. No action needed from homeowner, no date, no scope, no duration, and no authority cited. It came from Linda. Same tone she always used, neutral, professional, detached. Like she was documenting the weather, not shutting down a home. I read it twice. Then I checked the timestamp. Sent after the utilities were already cut. That's when it crossed the line. Maintenance notices don't arrive after the fact. They don't avoid specifics, and they don't skip legal language unless someone's hoping not to be questioned. I replied once, brief, direct, asked for the work order, asked for the contractor's name, asked for the expected restoration time. No emotion, no accusation, just questions. The response didn't come. Instead, another message went out to the HOA board. Same wording, same excuse, slightly adjusted phrasing. Linda wasn't answering me, she was covering herself. That's when the pattern became obvious. This wasn't an emergency, it wasn't routine maintenance, it wasn't even reactive, it was a retroactive justification. The kind of people who use it when they act first and hope documentation can be stitched together later. And once that happens, the issue stops being an inconvenience. It becomes an improper action because HOAs can issue notices, they can schedule maintenance, they can coordinate access. What they can't do is shut off utilities first and explain later. That's not compliance, that's exposure. I didn't wait for another email. Silence was already the answer. I went to the HOA office that afternoon, no appointment, no warning, just walked in while the lights at my place were still off. Linda was already there. She looked up from her laptop like she'd expected me. No surprise, no tension, just that same neutral expression she used when she wanted everything to feel procedural. "Alex," she said, "this isn't the right channel." That was her opening move. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I asked for the work order. She didn't answer. I asked which contractor was performing the maintenance. She adjusted her chair. I asked why the notice was sent after the utilities were cut. She folded her hands and said, "We are reviewing several compliance-related items." That wasn't an answer. I pointed that out. Linda nodded slowly, like she was listening, but her eyes had already moved past me. She was buying time. "This is temporary," she said. "You don't need to escalate." That word, escalate, told me everything. I told her utilities tied to a legal business can't be interrupted without notice or cause. She didn't disagree. She said, "That's your interpretation." No denial, no clarification, just distance. I asked when power and water would be restored. She said, "When maintenance is complete." I asked what maintenance. She smiled, not friendly, not hostile, controlled. "We'll be in touch," she said. That was the end of it. No paperwork. No timeline, no commitment, just authority trying to outweigh resistance. And as I walked out, I realized something important. Linda wasn't trying to win an argument. She was trying to see how much pressure it would take before I backed off. The power didn't come back that night, neither did the water. What did show up was an email, short, polite, carefully worded. It said my property was now under active review. No definition, no scope, no end date. By morning, the first consequence landed. A notice taped to my door. Unauthorized commercial activity under evaluation. No citation, no violation code. Just a statement designed to look official enough to intimidate. That was retaliation beat 1. Beat 2 came before lunch. My trash pickup was skipped. Not delayed, not rescheduled, skipped. When I called the city, they told me collection was suspended per community coordination. Those words again. Coordination, maintenance, review, always vague, always clean. Beat 3 came in the afternoon. A client cancelled, not because of me, because they were contacted. They said someone from the HOA told them the business might be temporarily non-operational due to compliance issues. That was the first time it crossed a line. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was interference. By evening, another email arrived. This one warned that continued operation during review could result in additional restrictions. No threats. Just consequences implied. That's how they do it. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough friction to make you doubt yourself. They weren't trying to shut me down overnight. They were trying to make staying open feel impossible. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't guessing anymore. I had timestamps, screenshots, call logs, and a pattern was forming, one that didn't say maintenance. It said pressure campaign, and pressure campaigns only work when the other side panics. I didn't. I started documenting everything. I stopped talking to them. That's when everything became clear. Every email from the HOA went into a dedicated folder. Every voicemail got transcribed. Every missed service, skipped pickup, and maintenance delay was logged with date, time, and impact. I treated it like an audit, because that's what this had become. The utility company confirmed something interesting in writing. There was no scheduled maintenance on my line. None. No city work order. No contractor request. No emergency ticket. Just a manual shut-off request submitted by a third party. Guess who? Then I pulled the HOA communications. Same language, same phrasing, same timestamps. Emails were sent minutes before each disruption. Messages labeled internal, accidentally forwarded to the wrong thread. One of them included a line they didn't mean for me to see. Pressure is working. He'll cave. That was the moment everything shifted. I exported billing statements showing the financial impact, screenshots from clients explaining why they cancelled, city confirmations stating the HOA had no authority to request a utility interruption. I even logged Linda's exact phrasing, not what she said, how she said it, always conditional, always implied, never direct, because direct creates liability. I laid it all out on a timeline. And once it was visible, the pattern wasn't subtle. Utilities off, right arrow compliance, email service disruption, right arrow warning notice, client interference, review escalation. This wasn't enforcement, it was leverage. And leverage only works when the other side doesn't know the rules. By the end of the night, I had a clean file, not emotional, not angry, just factual, the kind of file that doesn't argue, it just sits there, waiting. The motive didn't come from an email. It came from a document that wasn't meant to be read side by side with everything else. Buried in the HOA's shared drive was a proposal draft, not finalized, not approved. Just sitting there under a neutral file name that looked like routine planning. It outlined a future use evaluation for several properties along my side of the block. Mine was highlighted. The language was careful, strategic, full of phrases like long-term value alignment and usage consistency. But the conclusion was clear enough. They wanted control of the property, not ownership, leverage. If they could label my place as non-compliant, they could restrict activity. If they could restrict activity long enough, they could force a sale or a transfer under HOA pressure. And my home-based business was the excuse. It explained everything: the timing, the utility shut-off, the sudden interest in commercial activity. This wasn't enforcement. It was positioning. Linda's role made sense now. She wasn't freelancing, she was executing. The compliance language wasn't about rules, it was about creating a paper trail that looked justified from a distance. And that meant something important. This wasn't just improper action, it was coordinated. Which is where things shifted again, because HOAs can make mistakes, but coordinated pressure tied to property control, that moves the issue out of internal review territory and into legal exposure. I didn't confront Linda. I didn't respond to the proposal. I let them keep operating under the assumption that I didn't see it, because once intent is documented, timing matters, and the next move wasn't emotional, it was procedural. I didn't push back, that was the trap. Instead, I sent one email, short, polite, neutral. I asked for written confirmation of 3 things. whether the HOA had the authority to request utility interruptions, whether the review restricted my business operations, and whether those actions were approved by a board vote. No accusations, no threats, just clarification. Linda responded the next morning. She shouldn't have. Her reply was careful, but not careful enough. She confirmed the utilities were shut off under HOA direction. She confirmed the review was active and ongoing. And she confirmed no vote was required for compliance enforcement. That email changed everything. Because now the pressure wasn't implied. It was admitted. I forwarded the message, not to the board, but to the utility provider's compliance department and a local regulatory contact. I attached the documentation, timelines, screenshots, city confirmations, and Linda's email. The response came faster than I expected. The utility provider asked one question: did the HOA provide written authorization under municipal code? They hadn't, which meant the shutoff wasn't just improper, it was unauthorized. By the end of the day, power and water were restored. No apology, no explanation, just action, and silence from the HOA. That silence told me everything. They knew they'd crossed from pressure into exposure. And now, they weren't in control of the timeline anymore. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 48 hours later, not labeled as an emergency, of course. They called it a special clarification session. Everyone showed up: board members, homeowners. Even a representative from the utility provider sat quietly in the back. Linda arrived early. She looked composed, but not confident. Papers stacked too neatly, laptop open but untouched. She didn't make eye contact when I walked in. The board president opened with scripted language about misunderstandings and temporary measures. That didn't last long. The utility representative spoke next. Calm, direct, professional. He explained, in plain terms, that utilities had been shut off without legal authorization, based solely on the HOA instruction. He confirmed restoration happened only after compliance escalation. No emotion, just facts. The room shifted. Someone asked who approved the shutoff. All eyes went to Linda. She said it was part of an internal compliance process. The representative responded immediately. There is no internal process that allows third parties to interrupt service. That was it. The excuses stopped working. Emails were pulled up on the projector. Timelines displayed. Linda's written confirmation sat there, unedited. No spin. No context, just her words. The board asked if a vote had occurred. It hadn't. They asked if legal counsel was consulted. It wasn't. And when the board president finally asked why this wasn't disclosed earlier, Linda didn't answer. She closed her laptop. The meeting didn't end dramatically. It ended quietly, because once everything is on record, there's nothing left to argue. The utilities stayed on after that. No interruptions, no maintenance reviews, no follow-up emails pretending nothing happened. The HOA didn't apologize. They didn't explain. They didn't reach out at all. That silence was the outcome. Linda took a leave the following week. It wasn't announced. Her name just stopped appearing in emails. Compliance messages started coming from a shared inbox instead of a person. Processes changed, not loudly, not publicly, but noticeably. Notices began including documentation. Maintenance schedules were posted in advance. Anything involving utilities suddenly required written confirmation and third-party verification. The pressure tactics disappeared. So did the interest in my property. No more walk-bys, no more vague reviews, no more questions about business activity. The house went back to being invisible, which is exactly what it had been before someone decided to test leverage. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't bring it up in meetings. There was no need. When systems correct themselves, they do it quietly. And when authority realizes it overstepped, it doesn't announce the lesson, it absorbs it. The work resumed, clients returned, deadlines stopped slipping, normalcy came back the same way it had left, without ceremony. That's how you know the pressure failed. Here's the part people usually miss. This didn't resolve because I argued harder. It didn't resolve because I got louder. It didn't resolve because I threatened anyone. It resolved because I slowed down. Pressure only works when the other side reacts emotionally, when you panic, when you rush, when you try to defend yourself before understanding what's actually happening. I didn't do that. I documented. I asked for clarity in writing. I let people explain themselves, and eventually they did. Legitimate authority doesn't fear documentation, it welcomes it. Authority that isn't eventually trips over its own words. That's what happened here. Not because I won, but because the process was allowed to run its course. If you're dealing with an HOA, a board, or anyone using vague language and pressure instead of clear rules, remember this: don't rush, don't perform. Don't argue emotionally. Let them put things in writing. If you want more real stories like this, not exaggerated, not theatrical, but grounded in how these situations actually unfold, subscribe. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA that crossed a line, share your experience in the comments. Someone reading right now might need to know how this really ends.